The morning sun cast long shadows across Lancaster County's patchwork fields as Elon Musk's Tesla Model X rolled to a stop on the gravel driveway of the Stoltzfus farm. The contrast couldn't have been starker. The sleek electric vehicle beside, a weathered wooden barn where a horse-drawn plow rested against sun-bleached boards. What began as a PR opportunity for sustainable energy would become a lesson in humility that would transform both men's worlds. Jacob Stoltzfus, his beard gray with 60 years of wisdom, stood quietly by his innovative mechanical irrigation system, a masterpiece of engineering that used no electricity, yet rivaled modern technology in its efficiency. Neither man could have predicted how this unlikely meeting would reshape their understanding of progress. Before Elon stepped out of his car, he glanced at his phone one last time, unaware that the greatest innovation he'd discover wouldn't require a single watt of power. What could a simple Amish farmer teach one of the world's most brilliant tech innovators about the future of sustainable technology? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Lancaster County morning carried the sweet scent of fresh cut hay and warming earth as Jacob Stoltzfus stepped onto his front porch, a steaming cup of coffee warming his weathered hands. At 60 years old, he'd watched thousands of such sunrises paint the sky above his family's farm, each one a reminder of God's grace and the simple beauty of their way of life. His wife Hannah's wind chimes tinkled softly in the morning breeze, a melody that had accompanied their breakfast prayers for 35 years. "The English are coming today," Hannah said softly, joining him on the porch. Her gray-streaked hair was neatly tucked beneath her traditional white prayer covering, and her eyes held the same gentle wisdom that had first drawn Jacob to her at a community gathering decades ago. "Sarah says it's that car fellow, the one who builds rockets." Jacob nodded, taking another sip of his coffee. Their daughter Sarah, who worked as a liaison between the Amish community and the outside world, had explained the situation last week. Some wealthy businessman wanted to talk about putting solar panels on Amish farms. The bishop had agreed to the meeting, though Jacob suspected it was more out of courtesy than genuine interest. The world moves too fast these days, Jacob mused, watching as their youngest son David led the horses from the barn. At 22, David represented the future of their community, deeply rooted in tradition yet possessed of a remarkable gift for mechanical innovation. The boy could look at any problem and devise an elegant solution using nothing but wood, metal, and the strength God provided through nature. "Perhaps that's why God arranged this meeting," Hannah suggested, her hand finding Jacob's arm. "To remind them there's still wisdom in taking things slowly." The sound of tires on gravel drew their attention to the long driveway. Sarah's modest car appeared first, followed by two sleek vehicles that seemed to belong more in a science fiction novel than on an Amish farm. Jacob set his coffee down and straightened his black vest, a gesture Hannah had seen countless times before important meetings. Sarah emerged from her car first, her traditional dress a bridge between worlds. Though she'd chosen to remain Amish after her rumspringa, her role as a community liaison meant she understood both the old ways and the new. Behind her, car doors opened with a soft whir that seemed almost apologetic in the morning quiet. Elon Musk stepped out, his casual attire somehow making him seem more out of place than if he'd worn a business suit. Behind him, two assistants emerged, tablets in hand, already tapping away at screens that reflected the morning sun. "Mr. and Mrs. Stoltzfus," Sarah called out, climbing the porch steps to embrace her parents. "This is Mr. Musk and his team. They've come to learn about our farming methods and discuss some ideas about sustainable energy." Jacob stepped forward, extending his hand. "Welcome to our home," he said simply. "God's peace be with you." Elon took the offered hand, his grip firm but not challenging. "Thank you for having us, Mr. Stoltzfus. I've heard fascinating things about your irrigation systems." Behind them, David had paused in his morning chores, watching the interaction, with poorly concealed curiosity. Jacob noticed one of Elon's assistants studying the complex pulley system David had designed for lifting heavy loads into the barn loft. All mechanical, no electricity required. "Perhaps," Jacob suggested, "before we talk about changes, you'd like to see how we do things now." Elon's eyes lit up with genuine interest. That's exactly why I'm here. I believe there's something remarkable happening on this farm. Something that might help us rethink how we approach sustainable technology. Hannah had already disappeared inside, and the smell of fresh-baked bread wafted through the screen door. First, Jacob said, you'll join us for breakfast. We can't properly discuss the future on an empty stomach. The kitchen table presented a study in contrasts. Elon's tablets and phone stacked carefully to one side, while Hannah's homemade bread and jam took center stage. David and Sarah joined them, along with Jacob and Hannah's older children, Matthew, who ran the dairy operation, and Ruth, who managed their extensive vegetable gardens. Everything you see on this table, Jacob explained as Hannah poured coffee, comes from within a mile of where we're sitting. The bread from our wheat, the jam from our berries, the milk from our cows, the honey from our bees. Elon spread butter on a warm slice of bread. Complete sustainability, he observed. Zero carbon footprint for your food production. We don't think in those terms, Matthew spoke up, his voice respectful but firm. We think about being good stewards of what God has given us. The land provides if we treat it right. Show him the irrigation system, David suggested, unable to contain his enthusiasm any longer. The one we designed last summer during the drought. Jacob nodded, and after breakfast, they walked the property. David led them to a series of wooden water wheels and gravity-fed channels that distributed water throughout their fields with remarkable efficiency. The system used no electricity, instead relying on principles of physics and careful observation of the land's natural contours. This is brilliant, Elon muttered, crouching to examine a particularly clever joint that allowed for seasonal adjustments. The engineering principles here? It's like watching the evolution of technology in reverse, but arriving at solutions we haven't even considered. David designed most of it, Jacob said proudly. He has a gift for seeing how things could work better. They continued their tour, with David eagerly explaining each innovation. The passive solar heating system for the greenhouse, the wind-powered grain mill, the natural refrigeration system that kept their dairy cool through summer heat. Each solution elegant in its simplicity, each one working in harmony with natural laws rather than trying to overcome them. But surely, one of Elon's assistants interjected, you could increase productivity with modern technology. Solar panels could power electric pumps. Automated systems could reduce manual labor. Jacob held up a hand. We have nothing against progress, he said carefully. But we ask ourselves, will this change bring us closer together or push us further apart? Will it make us more dependent or less dependent? Will it serve the community or just the individual? Elon had grown quiet, his usual rapid-fire speech patterns slowing as he absorbed what he was seeing. You're not just farming differently, he said finally. You're approaching the entire problem of sustainability from a completely different angle. Sarah, who had been quietly observing, added, we believe that true sustainability isn't just about energy sources or carbon footprints. It's about maintaining relationships with the land, with each other, with God. As they approached the main barn, a group of community members had gathered for a barn raising on the neighboring farm. The sound of hammers and saws filled the air, punctuated by calls and laughter. Children darted between adults' legs carrying tools and snacks. This is what we mean by sustainability, Jacob explained. Today we help the Yoders build their barn. Next month, they'll help us bring in the harvest. No one pays anyone. No one keeps score. We simply take care of each other. Elon watched the barn raising with intense interest. The efficiency of the operation, the way everyone knows their role, it's like a perfectly choreographed dance. But without a choreographer, Hannah added, having joined them with a basket of food for the workers. Each person simply does what needs doing. We've learned this from our parents who learned it from theirs. As the morning wore on, Jacob could see the wheels turning in Elon's mind. The man's reputation for rapid innovation and futuristic thinking was being challenged by solutions that were centuries old, yet surprisingly relevant to modern problems. Mr. Stoltzfus, Elon said finally, I came here thinking I could help modernize your farming methods. Instead, I'm starting to wonder if your methods might help us modernize our thinking about technology." Jacob smiled, remembering something his father used to say. "Sometimes," he offered, "the best way forward is to look back and remember what we've forgotten." The sun had climbed high in the sky, and Hannah was already preparing lunch for the barn-raising crew. The morning's meeting had gone nothing like what either man had expected, but perhaps that was God's plan all along. As they walked back toward the house, David fell into step beside Elon, eagerly sharing his ideas for improving their wind-powered systems. Jacob watched them go, thinking about the strange ways God brought people together. Perhaps this unlikely meeting would bear fruit, in ways none of them could yet imagine. After all, true innovation didn't always mean creating something new. Sometimes it meant rediscovering something timeless. The afternoon brought a different kind of energy to the farm as storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Inside the main house, Hannah had set out a spread that demonstrated the full bounty of their land. Fresh bread, churned butter, homemade pickles, and a steaming pot of chicken soup that had been simmering since dawn. "Your mechanical systems are impressive," Elon said, accepting a bowl of soup from Hannah. "But what happens during extreme weather? Storms, droughts, unexpected freezes?" Jacob exchanged a knowing look with David. "Perhaps it's best to show you," he said, "after we eat." The meal proceeded with the comfortable rhythm of people who had worked up an honest hunger. Even Elon's assistants had set aside their tablets, drawn into the simple pleasure of fresh food and unhurried conversation. "Each season brings its own challenges," Matthew explained, breaking off a piece of bread. "But our systems are designed to adapt. We learned long ago that fighting nature is less effective than working with it." Ruth, who had remained quiet for most of the morning, spoke up. "Take our greenhouse, for example. We don't just grow food there, we've created an entire ecosystem. The fish waste fertilizes the plants. The plants clean the water for the fish, and the whole system helps heat the building in winter." Elon's eyes lit up. "A closed-loop aquaponics system? Without electricity?" "David designed it," Ruth said proudly. "He studied how the old Roman baths maintained temperature and adapted the principle." After lunch, despite the threatening weather, the group made their way to the greenhouse. The structure itself was a marvel of passive solar design, its angles carefully calculated to capture maximum sunlight in winter and minimize heat in summer. The air inside was humid and alive with the smell of growing things. "The real innovation," David explained, leading them through rows of thriving vegetables, "is in the water circulation system." He pointed to a series of graduated pools where fish swam lazily. "The water flows naturally between levels, powered by gravity and thermal convection. The fish waste feeds the plants clean the water, and the whole cycle continues, without any external input except sunlight." One of Elon's assistants, who had been taking notes, looked up. "But the initial setup must have been complex. The calculations for flow rates, the balance of the ecosystem, that's where our community knowledge comes in," Jacob interjected. "We've been observing natural systems for generations. David didn't need complex calculations. He watched how water moves in streams, how fish behave in different conditions, how plants respond to various nutrients. Nature already solved these problems. We just needed to pay attention." The first drops of rain began to fall as they moved to the barn, where David was eager to demonstrate another innovation. The barn itself was a testament to Amish engineering. Not a nail in sight, the entire structure held together with wooden pegs and precise joinery. "Watch this," David said, pulling a lever. Above them, a series of wooden gears began to turn, driven by the weight of rainwater collecting in a series of channels on the roof. The movement powered a ventilation system that would help dry the hay stored in the loft, preventing mold and spontaneous combustion. "The faster it rains, the faster the system works," David explained. "When we need it most, it works hardest. And when the rain stops, the collected water is channeled to the fields through our irrigation system." Elon stood in silence, watching the elegant mechanical dance above them. His expression was one Jacob had seen before on visitors from the outside world, a mixture of surprise, respect, and perhaps a touch of humility. "You know, Elon said finally. We spend billions trying to develop smart systems that can adapt to changing conditions. But this is genuine intelligence. No programming, no algorithms, just pure mechanical response to natural forces. The rain was falling steadily now, drumming on the barn roof. Through the open door they could see the community members, at the barn raising efficiently covering their work and materials, moving with the practiced coordination of people who had done this countless times before. That's what we've been trying to tell you, Sarah said gently. True sustainability isn't about adding more technology. Sometimes it's about finding the wisdom in simpler solutions. As they watched the rain, Jacob shared a story his grandfather had told him about the Great Drought of 1954, when many English farms failed. But the Amish community survived through careful water management and mutual aid. We learned then that our strength isn't in fighting nature, but in working together and adapting to what God sends us. The afternoon wore on, and the conversation deepened. Elon's questions became more thoughtful, less focused on how to improve the Amish systems and more on understanding the principles behind them. His assistants had filled numerous pages with notes and sketches, documenting solutions that no computer had ever calculated. As evening approached, the unexpected turn of events that would transform both men's worlds began to unfold. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm, and the group had moved to the workshop adjacent to the main barn. This was David's domain, a cathedral of wood and iron where ancient techniques met innovative problem-solving. There's something I've been working on, David said, his usual reserved demeanor giving way to barely contained excitement. Father, I think it's time to show them. Jacob nodded slowly. He'd watched his son spend countless hours in this workshop over the past year, working on what he called his contribution to the future. The bishop had already visited to ensure the project remained within their community's guidelines, and after much discussion and prayer, had given his blessing. David pulled back a heavy canvas tarp, revealing what appeared to be an intricate, mechanical system constructed primarily of wood, with carefully crafted metal components. At its center was a series of interconnected wheels and gears, reminiscent of an old clock mechanism but on a much larger scale. I call it the natural energy amplification system, David explained, his voice steady despite his evident pride, NEES for short. Elon stepped closer, his eyes scanning the apparatus with growing interest. The system was unlike anything he'd seen before, a harmonious blend of classical mechanics and innovative design. What exactly does it do? He asked, already reaching out to touch one of the wooden gears. It's a mechanical energy storage and distribution system, David explained, but instead of using batteries or electrical components, it works entirely through mechanical principles. Watch this. David turned a hand crank, and the entire system came to life. Wooden gears meshed silently, their teeth carved with remarkable precision. A series of weights and counterweights began to move, and somewhere within the apparatus a soft clicking started like a heartbeat. The genius isn't in what it does, Jacob interjected, but in how it does it. Show them the efficiency. Numbers, David. David pulled out a worn notebook filled with careful calculations and hand-drawn diagrams. When combined with our existing wind and water power systems, NEES can store and distribute energy with an efficiency rate of 89%. Elon's eyebrows shot up. That's impossible. Even our best battery systems don't achieve that kind of efficiency without significant energy loss. That's because you're fighting physics, David said quietly. We're working with it. One of Elon's assistants, a young woman named Emily, who had been quietly observing until now, stepped forward. May I? She asked, gesturing to the notebook. David handed it over, and she began to flip through the pages, her expression changing from skepticism to astonishment. These calculations, they're incredibly sophisticated, but they're all based on classical mechanics. No electrical engineering at all. It's beautiful in its simplicity. The workshop fell silent except for the steady clicking of David's invention and the rain on the roof. Elon walked slowly around the device, studying it from every angle. His usual rapid-fire speech patterns had given way to thoughtful observation. What inspired this? He finally asked. David glanced at his father before answering. Last year, during the big storm, we lost 3 families' worth of harvest because we couldn't process it fast enough without power. I started thinking about how we could store the energy we generate naturally, from our water wheels, our wind catches, even from the daily work of our horses, and use it when and where we need it most. But this goes beyond simple energy storage, Elon mused. This system is actually learning from its environment, the way these weights adjust, the timing of the releases. It's responding to input patterns. Like I said, Jacob smiled, David has a gift. Sarah, who had been watching the interaction carefully, stepped forward. There's more, she said. Show them the distribution system, David. David led them to a large map pinned to the workshop wall. It showed the entire community, not just the Stoltzfus farm, but all the neighboring properties as well. Red lines crisscrossed the map, showing what looked like a network. Nice isn't meant for just one farm, David explained. It's designed to connect our entire community. Each farm would have a storage unit all linked by mechanical connections, mostly underground channels and pulley systems. When one farm has excess energy, it can share with others who need it. A mechanical smart grid, Elon breathed. Without computers, without electronics, just pure physics and community cooperation. Hannah, who had joined them in the workshop, spoke up. That's the real innovation here, not just the machine but how it brings people together. Each family would be responsible for maintaining their part of the system, just as we all help maintain our roads and bridges. The implications were starting to dawn on Elon. This wasn't just an interesting mechanical curiosity. It was a completely different approach to energy management, one that combined technical innovation with social cooperation. But here's where we need help, David said, his voice becoming serious. We've built a prototype and it works, but scaling it up to the whole community, that requires resources we don't have, and knowledge about materials we don't usually work with. Jacob watched as Elon processed this information. The tech billionaire had come to their farm thinking he would introduce modern solutions to an ancient community. Instead, he was being presented with an ancient solution to modern problems. Mr. Musk, Jacob said carefully, we didn't show you this to ask for money. David wanted to share his invention because he believes it might help others beyond our community, but we need to find a way to develop it that respects our ways. Elon was already pacing, his mind clearly racing with possibilities. What if, he started, then stopped, collecting his thoughts. What if we could create a partnership, not to modernize your farms, but to learn from them? To take these principles and help adapt them for other communities? The rain had stopped, and through the workshop windows they could see a rainbow arching over the freshly raised barn in the distance. The sight seemed to underscore the moment's significance, a bridge between two worlds, each with something valuable to offer the other. There would need to be rules, Jacob said firmly. Guidelines to protect our way of life. Of course, Elon agreed quickly. Your community would maintain complete control over the development here. We would simply provide resources and help document the principles so they could be adapted elsewhere. Sarah stepped forward. I could help coordinate, she offered. Ensure everything stays within our community's guidelines while facilitating the knowledge transfer. The group spent the next hour discussing possibilities. Emily, Elon's assistant, had filled several pages with notes and questions. David's invention continued its steady clicking in the background, like a metronome keeping time as two different worlds found common ground. As the evening drew to a close, Hannah insisted everyone stay for supper. The conversation around the dinner table was animated but thoughtful, focusing not just on technical details but on larger questions of community, sustainability, and the responsible use of technology. You know, Elon said as they finished their meal, I came here thinking I would teach you about sustainable energy. Instead, you've taught me about sustainable living. There's a profound difference. Jacob nodded. Sometimes the best innovations aren't about creating something new, but about remembering something we've forgotten. As Elon and his team prepared to leave, David handed him a small wooden gear, perfectly carved and polished, smooth by use. A reminder, he said simply. The tech billionaire held the gear carefully, studying how the lamplight played across its surfaces. In this simple piece of wood, he saw something that had eluded him in all his years of pushing technology forward: the beauty of working with nature rather than trying to conquer it. The evening's revelations had set in motion events that would ripple far beyond the quiet boundaries of Lancaster County. As the group lingered over Hannah's homemade apple pie, Elon pulled out his phone and made a brief call. "I'm canceling my meetings for the next 2 days," he announced, returning to the table. "If you're willing, Mr. Stoltzfus, I'd like to learn more. Really understand what you've built here." Jacob exchanged glances with Hannah. Hosting an English visitor for multiple days wasn't common practice, but these were uncommon circumstances. After a moment's silent communication that spoke of decades of partnership, both nodded. "We have a guest house," Hannah offered. "It's simple, but comfortable." "Perfect," Elon replied, seeming genuinely pleased at the prospect of staying in the modest accommodation. "And I'd like to bring in a few more people, engineers who think differently, people who might understand what David has created here." Sarah raised a concern. "We'll need to speak with Bishop Yoder. Any project involving the community needs his approval." "Already sent word," David said quietly. "Samuel's bringing him by in the morning." The next day dawned clear and cool, the aftermath of the storm, leaving everything feeling fresh and renewed. Jacob was up before sunrise, as always, tending to the morning milking. He found Elon already awake, sitting on the guest house porch, notebook in hand. "Couldn't sleep," the billionaire admitted. "Keep thinking about the implications of David's system. It's not just the mechanical innovation, it's the whole approach to community energy management. We've been trying to solve these problems with more complexity, when the answer might be elegant simplicity." Bishop Yoder arrived just as Hannah was bringing out breakfast. He was a tall man with a thoughtful demeanor, his long beard showing more gray than black these days. Samuel, his son and the community's schoolteacher, accompanied him. The meeting that followed would later be remembered as a turning point for both the Amish community and Elon's approach to sustainable technology. The bishop listened carefully as David explained his invention, occasionally asking pointed questions about how it aligned with their ways. "The beauty of it," Samuel observed, "is that it strengthens our community bonds rather than weakening them. Each family becomes both contributor and beneficiary." Elon's team had grown by 2. A mechanical engineer named Dr. Chen, who specialized in classical mechanics, and a social anthropologist, Dr. Martinez, who studied how communities manage shared resources. Both sat in respectful silence, taking notes as the discussion unfolded. "What we're proposing," Elon explained to the bishop, "is a partnership that would allow us to document and understand these principles while respecting your community's autonomy and values. No electricity, no computers, just learning from what you've already built." Bishop Yoder stroked his beard thoughtfully. "And how would this knowledge be used?" "There are communities all over the world struggling with energy access," Dr. Martinez interjected. "Places where complex technology isn't practical or sustainable. This could offer them a different path." The bishop turned to Jacob. "You've known David all his life. You believe this is a right path?" Jacob was quiet for a moment, considering. "I believe God gives different gifts to different people. David's gift is finding new ways to use old wisdom. Perhaps sharing that gift carefully and respectfully is part of our calling." The discussion continued through the morning and into the afternoon. Plans were drawn up, guidelines established. The bishop insisted on clear boundaries. No photographs of people, no disruption of daily life, no technology that violated their principles. "We'll need to present this to the community," Bishop Yoder finally said. "Call a gathering for tomorrow evening." As the sun began to set, Elon found himself back in David's workshop, watching the young man make fine adjustments to his invention. The clicking had taken on a different rhythm, responding to changes in air pressure as the weather shifted. "You know what's remarkable?" Elon mused. "This system doesn't just store and distribute energy. It teaches us something about how communities themselves work. The way it adapts, the way it shares resources. It's like a mechanical model of human cooperation." David looked up from his work. That's what Father always says. True innovation should bring people together, not push them apart. Later that evening, as the fireflies began to dance in the gathering dusk, the Stoltzfus family sat on their porch with their unusual guest. The conversation had turned philosophical, touching on questions of progress, tradition, and the true meaning of advancement. I've spent my life pushing the boundaries of technology, Elon reflected, always looking forward, always seeking the next breakthrough. But maybe sometimes we need to look backward to move forward. Your community has preserved knowledge that the rest of us have forgotten in our rush to modernize. Hannah brought out one last cup of coffee for everyone. We don't reject progress, she said softly. We just ask different questions about it. Not just can we, but should we? Not just, does it make things easier, but does it make life better? As night settled over the farm, the stars emerged in a dazzling display, undiminished by artificial light. Tomorrow would bring the community gathering, where the future of David's invention would be decided. But for now, in this moment, two very different worlds had found common ground in the simple truth that sometimes the most powerful innovations are the ones that remind us of what we already know. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The community gathering was set for dusk the following day, in the large barn that had just been raised. As word spread through the community, there was a quiet buzz of anticipation. It wasn't often that English visitors, let alone someone as prominent as Elon Musk, sought their counsel rather than trying to change their ways. Throughout the day, families arrived in their buggies, bringing covered dishes and curious expressions. The women gathered in the kitchen, preparing a feast that would feed over 200 people, while the men congregated near David's workshop, examining his invention with careful consideration. It's like the old water mills in Germany, Elder Miller observed, running his hand along the wooden gears. My grandfather used to tell stories about how entire villages would share the power from a single mill. David nodded eagerly. That's part of what inspired the design. I studied the old mechanical systems our ancestors used in Europe. Meanwhile, Elon had spent the morning with Dr. Chen, the mechanical engineer, poring over David's notebooks. The more they studied the designs, the more impressed they became with their elegant simplicity. Look at this gear ratio calculation, Dr. Chen murmured, pointing to one of David's drawings. He's independently discovered principles that took mechanical engineers centuries to develop. And in some cases, he's found even more efficient solutions. Sarah moved between groups, translating not just words but concepts, helping bridge the gap between the technical language of the English visitors and the practical knowledge of her community. Her role was becoming increasingly crucial as more community members arrived and interest in the project grew. By late afternoon, the barn was filled with the smell of fresh bread and the murmur of conversations in Pennsylvania Dutch and English. Hannah had organized the food preparation with military precision, directing a small army of women who turned out pies, casseroles, and traditional dishes with practiced efficiency. Food brings people together, she explained to Dr. Martinez, who was fascinated by the community's organizational structure. When we share a meal, we share our lives. As the sun began to set, Bishop Yoder called the gathering to order. The community settled onto long wooden benches, arranged in a semicircle around David's invention, which had been carefully transported to the barn. The English visitors sat respectfully to one side, with Sarah nearby to translate as needed. We are here, the bishop began in Pennsylvania Dutch, with Sarah translating quietly for the visitors, to consider something new. Our way has always been to carefully weigh any change against our values and our commitment to God's will. He gestured for David to step forward. The young man stood straight, his voice clear as he explained his invention to the assembled community. He spoke first in their dialect, then repeated key points in English for the visitors' benefit. The system works with nature, not against it, David explained. Like our farming methods, it respects God's creation while serving our community's needs. As David demonstrated the system's operation, the clicking of gears echoed through the hushed barn. Children pressed forward to watch, their eyes wide, as the weights and counterweights moved in their intricate dance. Then Jacob stood, addressing his neighbors. We have always taught our children to use their God-given gifts wisely. David has been given a gift for understanding how things work. The question before us is not whether this gift comes from God. We can see that it does. The question is, how this gift should be used. Elon was next to speak, having carefully prepared his words with Sarah's help. I come to you not as a teacher, but as a student. What David has created here, what your community has preserved, may hold answers to problems that affect millions of people worldwide. He went on to explain his vision for the partnership, how the principles behind David's invention could help communities in developing nations, remote areas, and places where complex technology wasn't practical or sustainable. We wouldn't be changing your ways, he emphasized. We would be learning from them, helping others benefit from your wisdom while respecting your traditions. The community listened intently, and then the discussion began in earnest. Questions were raised about how the partnership would work, how the community's ways would be protected, and what benefits it might bring to their own people. Elder Miller spoke about the historical precedent, how their ancestors had often shared their knowledge of farming and crafts with their neighbors. It is not against our ways to help others, he reminded them. It is part of our calling. Martha Yoder, the bishop's wife and a respected voice in the community, raised practical concerns about how the project might affect their daily lives. Will we have English visitors disrupting our work? Will our young people be drawn away from our ways? These were important questions, and the discussion continued as the sky darkened outside and lanterns were lit within the barn. The warm light cast long shadows among the gathered families, adding a sense of solemnity to the proceedings. Sarah's mother-in-law, Rebecca Lapp, spoke next. I remember when we first allowed Sarah to work as a liaison with the English world. Many feared it would draw her away from our ways. Instead, it has helped her appreciate them more deeply and help others understand us better. The discussion continued, with various community members sharing their thoughts and concerns. Through it all, David's invention continued its steady, clicking like a heartbeat underlying the conversation. As the evening wore on, a consensus began to emerge. The community saw value in sharing their knowledge, but they wanted clear guidelines and boundaries. Bishop Yoder worked with Elon and the community leaders to establish these principles. All work would respect the Amish way of life and religious beliefs. No electrical or electronic technology would be introduced into the community. Documentation would focus on principles and methods, not individuals. Any benefits from the project would be shared among the entire community. The partnership would be reviewed regularly by community leaders. Dr. Martinez, watching the process unfold, whispered to Dr. Chen, "This is remarkable. They're not just making a decision, they're weaving it into the fabric of their community." As the meeting drew to a close, Bishop Yoder called for a prayer. The entire community bowed their heads, English visitors following suit respectfully. The prayer, offered in both Pennsylvania Dutch and English, asked for guidance and wisdom in this new endeavor. After the prayer, Hannah and her team of helpers began serving the feast they had prepared. The atmosphere shifted from formal discussion to comfortable community gathering. People moved between tables sharing food and conversation, the barriers between English and Amish beginning to soften. Elon found himself deep in conversation with a group of young Amish farmers, each eager to share their own innovations in sustainable farming practices. Dr. Chen was surrounded by curious children, explaining basic principles of mechanics using pieces of pie crust as demonstration tools. Later that evening, as families began heading home in their buggies, Jacob and Elon stood outside the barn, watching the fireflies dance among the cornfields. "You understand," Jacob said quietly, "that this won't be like your usual projects. We move at a different pace here." Elon nodded. "That's exactly why it's important. The world needs to remember there are different ways to solve problems, different rhythms to follow. Inside the barn, David was showing Dr. Chen a new modification he'd been considering for the system. Sarah sat nearby, her notebook filled with translations of technical terms into Pennsylvania Dutch, building a bridge between two worlds one word at a time. The next few days would begin a new chapter for both the Amish community and Elon's approach to sustainable technology. But for now, in the quiet of a Pennsylvania evening, two very different worlds had found common ground in the steady clicking of wooden gears and the shared belief that sometimes the best way forward is to remember what we've left behind. The following weeks brought subtle but significant changes to the Stoltzfus farm. A small workshop was constructed adjacent to David's original space, where Dr. Chen and other visiting engineers could document and study the mechanical systems without disrupting daily farm operations. The building, raised in traditional Amish fashion with the help of the entire community, stood as a physical bridge between two worlds. Notice how they problem solve, Dr. Martinez observed to Elon as they watched the community work together to lift a heavy beam into place. No individual takes credit. Every solution emerges from collective wisdom and effort. The project began to take shape in ways neither party had initially expected. While Elon's team had come to study David's energy storage system, they found themselves learning far more about sustainable community practices than mere mechanics. "It's all connected," David explained one morning as he demonstrated a new modification to the system. "The way we harvest crops, the way we share labor, the way we store and distribute resources, it's all part of the same principle of working with nature rather than against it." Dr. Chen had taken to arriving at dawn, fascinated by how the community's daily rhythm aligned with natural cycles. He'd abandoned his digital tablets in favor of hand-drawn diagrams and notes, finding that the slower pace actually helped him think more clearly about the mechanical principles involved. "In our world," he confided to Sarah, "we often mistake speed for efficiency. But watching how your community works, I'm beginning to understand that true efficiency often requires patience." The partnership faced its first real test when one of Elon's younger engineers, excited by the potential of David's invention, suggested adding electronic sensors to monitor the system's performance. But that would defeat the purpose, David said quietly. "The system works because people have to pay attention, to understand it, to be part of it. Adding sensors would separate us from that understanding." This led to a lengthy discussion among the project team about the nature of technology and progress. Elon, who had built his career on pushing technological boundaries, found himself advocating for simplicity. "The genius of this system," he explained to his team, "is that it can be understood, maintained, and repaired by the people who use it. That's true sustainability." The news of the partnership had begun to spread beyond Lancaster County. Journalists sought interviews, which the community politely declined. Other technology companies expressed interest in the project, but Elon, understanding the community's wishes, helped keep the focus small and controlled. One morning, Jacob found Elon sitting alone in the workshop, holding one of David's wooden gears, lost in thought. "Having doubts?" Jacob asked, settling onto a nearby workbench. "The opposite," Elon replied. "I'm thinking about how we've overcomplicated everything. We've been so focused on adding features that we've forgotten about durability, repairability, community involvement." Jacob nodded. "When we build something, we think about how our grandchildren will use it. That changes the way you design." The project's impact began to show in unexpected ways. The community's young people, who sometimes struggled with the pull of the outside world, found new pride in their traditional knowledge. They saw how their understanding of mechanical principles, passed down through generations, could help solve modern problems. Sarah's role grew increasingly important as she helped navigate between traditional wisdom and modern application. She organized regular meetings where community elders could share their knowledge of traditional mechanical systems, which Dr. Chen and his team documented carefully. "It's like rediscovering a lost language," Dr. Martinez noted. "These solutions evolved over centuries of trial and error, but they've been largely forgotten in our rush to digitize everything." Hannah, meanwhile, observed the subtle changes in her family and community with a mother's careful eye. She saw how David had grown more confident, not just in his technical abilities, but in his commitment to their way of life. She watched Sarah flourish in her role as bridge builder between cultures. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, she shared her thoughts. Sometimes God's plan isn't what we expect. We thought we needed to protect our ways from the outside world. Instead, He's using our ways to help the world remember something important. The project also began to influence Elon's other ventures. His engineers started incorporating principles of mechanical simplicity and community involvement into their designs. The idea of appropriate technology, solutions that match the needs and capabilities of the users, began to gain traction in his companies. As summer turned to autumn in Lancaster County, the partnership between the Amish community and Elon's team entered a new phase. The first prototype of what they now called the Community Energy Network was taking shape, connecting 3 neighboring farms through an intricate system of mechanical linkages. One crisp October morning, David stood with Elon and Dr. Chen at the highest point of the Stoltzfus farm, surveying the network of wooden channels and gears that stretched across the rolling landscape. The fall harvest was in full swing, and the system was getting its first real test under heavy load. "Watch this," David said, pointing to where Jacob and a team of workers were bringing in corn with a horse-drawn wagon. As they emptied the wagon into the granary, the weight of the corn activated a series of counterweights. The stored energy was immediately transferred through the mechanical network to the Miller farm next door, where it powered a grain mill. "Perfect efficiency," Dr. Chen murmured, scribbling calculations in his notebook. "The energy that would normally be lost in the grain's descent is captured and repurposed, and the transfer mechanism is practically frictionless." Elon shook his head in amazement. "We've spent millions developing energy storage solutions, and here's a system that uses gravity and basic mechanics to achieve the same goal." The success of the harvest time implementation brought new visitors to the community. Despite their reluctance for publicity, word had spread through academic circles about the innovative mechanical network. Universities requested permission to send engineering students to study the system, and sustainable development organizations expressed interest in adapting the principles for developing nations. Bishop Yoder called another community meeting to address these requests. This time the gathering took place in the new workshop, where scale models of the energy network demonstrated its principles. "We must be careful," the bishop cautioned, "to maintain our balance. We can share our knowledge without becoming an attraction." Sarah had developed a solution. "What if we create teaching models?" she suggested. "Simple versions that demonstrate the principles without requiring visitors to observe our daily lives." The idea resonated with both the community and Elon's team. David and Dr. Chen began working on simplified demonstrations that could travel to universities and development organizations. These models, built entirely of wood and basic metals, could be assembled and maintained without modern technology. Meanwhile, the practical benefits of the network were becoming clear. When the Yoder family needed extra power for their textile workshop, the system redistributed energy from the Stoltzfus farm's wind catches. When the miller's grain mill had excess capacity, that energy helped pump water to irrigate the community's shared vegetable gardens. "It's not just about energy," Dr. Martinez observed during one of her documentation sessions. "The system is strengthening community bonds. People are thinking more collectively about resource use." The project faced its share of challenges. And your early autumn storm tested the network's resilience, and some connections needed reinforcement. But even these setbacks proved valuable, as the community worked together to improve the system's durability. "In the English world," Elon remarked to Jacob during one repair session, "we would have replaced everything with newer parts. Here you adapt and strengthen what exists." Jacob nodded, adjusting a wooden gear. "When something breaks, it teaches you where it needs to be stronger. Each repair makes the whole system better." The changing season brought new applications for the network. As temperatures dropped, the community developed ways to store and distribute heat energy. The greenhouse, now connected to the system, shared its daytime warmth with other buildings through a series of mechanical heat exchangers. Hannah's kitchen became an unexpected proving ground for the technology. She and other community women, developed ways to use the stored energy for food preservation and preparation. Their practical innovations often surprise the engineers with their simplicity and effectiveness. See how the warming oven connects to the cooling storage? Hannah explained to Dr. Martinez, when one side needs heat, the other side can use the cooling. Nothing is wasted. The project's success began to influence Elon's other ventures in unexpected ways. His engineers started incorporating mechanical simplicity into their designs, and his companies began exploring how to adapt Amish principles of community resource sharing to modern technology projects. One evening, as the first snow of the season dusted the fields, Elon sat with the Stoltzfus family in their warm kitchen. The conversation turned to the future of the project. "We've had inquiries from communities in Africa and South America," he said. "Places where complex technology isn't practical, but where these mechanical principles could make a real difference." Sarah, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Perhaps that's why God brought this project to us. Not just to preserve our ways, but to share them where they're needed most." The discussion continued late into the evening, exploring how to expand the project's impact while preserving its integrity. David sketched ideas for adapting the system to different environments and needs, while Jacob and Hannah offered insights about maintaining community involvement. As winter settled over Lancaster County, the community energy network faced its greatest test. The harsh weather would challenge not just the mechanical systems, but the community's commitment to the project. Yet even as the cold winds blew, there was a warmth in the way the community had embraced this bridge between their traditional wisdom and the modern world's needs. Dr. Chen, who had initially viewed the project as a fascinating engineering study, found himself transformed by the experience. "In our rush to advance technology," he wrote in his journal, "we've forgotten that the most sustainable solutions are often the ones that bring people together, rather than isolate them." The project had also changed Elon's perspective on innovation. The man who had built his career on pushing technological boundaries now spoke about the importance of appropriate technology and community involvement. His talks at tech conferences began to include examples from the Amish community, though he was careful to respect their privacy and present the principles rather than specifics. One cold December morning, as David made his daily rounds checking the network's connections, he found Elon already in the workshop studying the original prototype. "Something wrong?" David asked, noting the intense look on the billionaire's face. "Just the opposite," Elon replied. "I'm realizing that this project might be more important than anything else I'm working on. We're not just developing sustainable energy solutions, we're rediscovering sustainable ways of living." The winter months brought new innovations to the network. The community developed ways to store and distribute heat from their traditional wood-burning stoves, creating a web of warmth that helped reduce fuel consumption across all the connected farms. Young people from the community, initially skeptical of the project, began to take pride in their involvement. They saw how their traditional knowledge could help solve modern problems, and many developed their own innovations within the framework of their beliefs. "It's like watching two worlds heal each other," Hannah observed one evening as she watched David teaching a group of younger children about the principles behind the network. "Our young people are finding new value in our old ways, and the English are remembering wisdom they'd forgotten." As the year drew to a close, the project had grown beyond anyone's initial expectations. What had started as a simple mechanical invention had evolved into a model for sustainable community development that was drawing attention from around the world. Yet through it all, the Stoltzfus family and their community remained grounded in their faith and traditions. The clicking of David's invention had become part of the daily rhythm of farm life, as natural as the sound of horses' hooves or the evening prayer. The January morning dawned bitter cold, with frost etching delicate patterns on the workshop windows. David was making his usual rounds of the network when he noticed something unusual in the main gear assembly. A slight variation in the rhythm, almost imperceptible to anyone who hadn't spent months listening to the system's steady heartbeat. He was examining the mechanism when Elon arrived, accompanied by a man David didn't recognize. The stranger wore an expensive suit beneath his winter coat, and his presence seemed to make Elon uncharacteristically tense. "David, this is Marcus Reynolds," Elon said, his voice carefully neutral. He's from the Department of Energy. The government official stepped forward, studying the mechanical network with keen interest. Remarkable, he said, though his tone suggested clinical analysis rather than admiration. We've been following this project's development with great interest. Sarah arrived moments later, having been called by Jacob when the unexpected visitors appeared. She took her place beside David, her presence both supportive and protective. The department has some concerns, Reynolds continued, pulling out a thick folder. This network represents a significant development in energy distribution technology. There are national security implications we need to discuss. The morning's revelation sent ripples through the community. Bishop Yoder called an emergency meeting, and by noon, the large barn was filled with concerned families. Reynolds presented the government's position. The mechanical network's principles needed to be properly documented, regulated, and potentially classified as sensitive technology. We're talking about a revolutionary approach to energy distribution, Reynolds explained to the assembled community. One that could have significant implications for national infrastructure. Elon, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. This is exactly what we were trying to avoid. The beauty of this system is its simplicity, its accessibility. Classifying it defeats the entire purpose. The community listened in silence as Reynolds outlined the government's proposals. They wanted to send in a team of experts to document everything. There would be regulations, oversight committees, security, protocols. Jacob stood slowly, his voice steady despite the tension. What you're suggesting would change everything about how this project works. Our community's strength lies in our simplicity, our independence. The world is more complicated than that now, Reynolds replied. We can't have unregulated energy networks, no matter how well-intentioned. The meeting continued into the afternoon, with Reynolds presenting more documents, more regulations, more complications. The simple beauty of David's invention seemed to be drowning in a sea of bureaucratic red tape. During a brief break, Elon found David in the workshop, where the young inventor was still trying to identify the strange variation he'd noticed that morning. I should have seen this coming, Elon said, watching David work. Any technology that threatens the status quo eventually attracts this kind of attention. David straightened up from his inspection. The system's behaving differently today, he said, seemingly more concerned with the mechanical puzzle than the political one. It's like it's trying to tell us something. As if in response to his words, the rhythm of the gears shifted again, more noticeably this time. David's eyes widened as he finally understood what he was seeing. It's adapting, he whispered. The cold has caused the wood to contract slightly, but instead of fighting it, the system is adjusting its ratios to compensate. It's doing exactly what we designed it to do, working with nature's changes rather than against them. The revelation sparked something in Elon's mind. That's it, he said, already pulling out his phone to make calls. We've been thinking about this all wrong. When the meeting reconvened, Elon had a new proposal. Instead of fighting the government's interest, they would demonstrate why their approach needed to remain free from conventional regulation. What you're seeing here isn't just an energy distribution system, Elon explained to Reynolds. It's a completely new paradigm for how communities can work together. The technology isn't in the gears and levers, it's in the way people interact with them. Over the next several hours, the community demonstrated how their network functioned. They showed how each family maintained their own section, how problems were solved collectively, how the system adapted to changing conditions without any central control. The network works because it's simple enough for everyone to understand and maintain, Sarah explained. Adding layers of regulation would make it less efficient, less adaptable, and ultimately less secure. Dr. Martinez, who had arrived mid-afternoon, after hearing about the situation, added her perspective. What you're seeing here is actually more secure than conventional infrastructure. Because it's decentralized and community-maintained, there's no single point of failure. Reynolds watched as the community worked together to adjust the system for the evening's needs. He saw how children as young as 10 understood the basic principles, how elderly members contributed their experience in predicting weather patterns that might affect the network's performance. Your conventional security protocols wouldn't work. Here, Jacob said quietly. They would destroy the very things that make this system successful. As the winter sun began to set, Reynolds sat in the Stoltzfus kitchen, warming his hands around a cup of Hannah's coffee. The formal bureaucrat had been replaced by a thoughtful man wrestling with a paradigm shift. I came here thinking I was dealing with a potential security risk, he admitted. Instead, I'm seeing what might be the most secure energy system I've ever encountered. Not because it's locked down, but because it's owned and understood by an entire community. The solution that emerged over the next few days was unlike anything the Department of Energy had ever implemented. Instead of imposing regulations, they would study how the community's approach to energy management could inform national infrastructure policies. We're not just looking at mechanical systems, Reynolds explained to his superiors in Washington. We're looking at a social technology that makes those systems work. You can't regulate that. You can only learn from it. The crisis had transformed into an opportunity, but it had also revealed something important about the project's future. The community gathered again, this time to discuss how to protect their innovation while sharing it with the world. Perhaps, Bishop Yoder suggested, we need to think about this like we think about our other crafts. We don't patent our furniture designs or keep our farming methods secret. We share them freely, knowing that the real value is in the way we work together. This perspective led to a new phase of the project. Instead of focusing on the mechanical details, they began documenting the principles of community-based energy management. Dr. Martinez worked with Sarah to create teaching materials that emphasized the social aspects of the system. The technology is simple, David explained to a group of visiting engineers. What's complex is the way we work together to maintain and adapt it. That's what needs to be understood and replicated. Elon, watching the community navigate this challenge, found himself reevaluating his own approach to innovation. We've been so focused on developing technology that doesn't need human intervention, he reflected. Maybe we should be developing technology that encourages human cooperation instead. The government's interest, though initially threatening, had inadvertently highlighted the project's true significance. It wasn't just about sustainable energy. It was about sustainable communities. As winter deepened, the network continued, its steady operation adapting to the cold, responding to the community's needs. The clicking of gears and movement of counterweights had become a kind of language, one that spoke of cooperation, adaptation, and the strength found in working together. David's morning inspections now often included apprentices from the community, young people eager to learn not just the mechanics of the system, but the principles behind it. They understood that they were part of something important, not just preserving their way of life, but showing how it could help address modern challenges. The crisis had changed everyone involved. Reynolds became a regular visitor, not as a regulator but as a student of the community's approach to technology and cooperation. Elon's team began incorporating principles of community engagement into their other projects, and the Amish community found new confidence in the value of their traditional wisdom. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Hannah expressed what many had been feeling. Sometimes what looks like a problem is really God showing us a new path. This challenge has helped us understand our own strength better. The winter stars shone bright over Lancaster County, their light reflecting off the snow-covered fields. In the workshop, David's invention continued its steady rhythm, adapting to the cold, responding to the community's needs, demonstrating, with every turn of its gears, that sometimes the most powerful innovations are the ones that bring people together. The implications of the government's interest continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Other communities, both Amish and English, began reaching out through proper channels, seeking to understand how they might implement similar systems. The Stoltzfus farm became a quiet center of innovation, though not in the way anyone had expected. What we're seeing, Dr. Martinez explained during one of her documentation sessions, is a complete inversion of how we typically think about technological advancement. Instead of making systems more complex and automated, we're making them more accessible and community-dependent. Reynolds, who continued his regular visits, brought news that shifted the project's trajectory yet again. The Department of Defense has taken interest, he informed them during a particularly cold February morning. They see potential applications for remote bases and disaster relief situations. This revelation brought fresh concerns to the community. Bishop Yoder called another meeting, this time in the warmth of the church house, where the entire community could gather comfortably despite the winter weather. "We must be careful," the bishop cautioned, "that our peaceful technology isn't turned to other purposes." It was Sarah who proposed a solution that would reshape the entire project. "What if," she suggested, "we create a set of principles, like our Ordnung, that must be followed by any community wanting to implement this system? Not just the mechanical rules, but the social and spiritual guidelines that make it work." The idea resonated deeply with both the community and their English partners. Over the next several weeks, they worked to articulate what became known as the Community Energy Principles. The system must strengthen, not replace, community bonds. All users must understand and be able to maintain their portion. No part should be more complex than necessary. Natural rhythms and patterns must be respected. Benefits must be shared equally among participants. The system should adapt to nature rather than trying to control it. Implementation must promote peace and cooperation. Elon, who had been quietly supportive during this process, saw the broader implications. "This isn't just about energy anymore," he observed during a late-night discussion with Jacob. "We're creating a template for how communities can work together in an age of increasing complexity." The winter's challenges had revealed something else: the network's remarkable resilience. During a particularly severe storm that knocked out power to much of Lancaster County, the connected Amish farms continued their operations uninterrupted. Their mechanical system, requiring no external power and maintained by the community itself, proved more reliable than the modern infrastructure surrounding them. This caught the attention of climate scientists and disaster preparedness experts. Dr. Chen found himself explaining the system's principles to emergency management teams, showing how communities could create resilient local networks using simple, maintainable technology. "The genius," he explained, "is in how it fails gracefully. When something breaks, it's immediately apparent and can be fixed with local resources and knowledge. There's no need for specialized parts or external expertise." David, meanwhile, had been quietly working on adaptations of his original design. He created simplified versions that could be built with whatever materials were locally available: bamboo in tropical regions, recycled metal in urban areas, carved stone in mountain communities. "The principles remain the same," he explained to a group of visiting engineers. "Work with what you have, understand every part, keep it simple, involve everyone." The government's intervention, which had initially seemed like a threat, had ultimately helped clarify and strengthen the project's core mission. It wasn't about creating a new technology to be controlled and regulated. It was about rediscovering and sharing principles that communities had once known but forgotten. Hannah, ever observant, noticed how the challenge had affected her family. David had grown more confident in articulating the spiritual aspects of his invention. Sarah had found a deeper appreciation for her role as a bridge between worlds. Jacob had discovered new ways to share their community's wisdom with others who needed it. "Sometimes," she remarked during evening prayers, "God uses our challenges to show us the true purpose of our gifts." As winter began to soften toward spring, the project entered a new phase. The government's interest had evolved from regulation to learning, and the principles developed by the community were being adapted for use in various contexts around the world. Reynolds, who had become something of an advocate for the community's approach, helped establish a unique classification for their system, not as a controlled technology, but as a protected cultural practice, similar to traditional agricultural methods or crafting techniques. "What we're protecting," he explained to his superiors, "isn't the mechanical design. That's simple enough. We're protecting the wisdom of how communities can work together to create sustainable solutions." The spring thaw brought with it a new sense of possibility. The network had not just survived its greatest challenge, it had evolved because of it. Like the mechanical system itself, the community had adapted to pressure by becoming stronger, more flexible, and more deeply connected. As spring blossomed across Lancaster County, the Community Energy Network faced its most ambitious test yet. Word had spread through proper channels about the system's success, and now representatives from communities worldwide were arriving to learn from the Amish example. The challenge wasn't just in sharing their knowledge, it was in doing so while preserving their way of life. Sarah, whose role had evolved far beyond simple translation, developed a careful protocol for these visits. Groups would first meet at a newly constructed learning center on the edge of the community's land, a simple building that demonstrated the network's principles without intruding on daily life. We need to share our knowledge without becoming a tourist attraction, she explained during a community meeting. Each visitor must understand they're here to learn, not to observe. The first major delegation arrived in early April, a group of indigenous leaders from various South American communities, accompanied by Dr. Martinez and a small team of sustainable development experts. They came seeking solutions for their own communities, many of which were struggling with the challenges of maintaining traditional ways in a modernizing world. Manuel Santos, an elder from a remote Andean village, immediately grasped the deeper significance of what the Amish had created. "This is not just about energy," he said through an interpreter, watching David demonstrate the system. "This is about preserving our way of life while adapting to new challenges." The interaction between the Amish community and their indigenous visitors revealed surprising parallels. Both groups had maintained traditional knowledge in the face of modernization, both valued community over individual gain, and both understood the importance of working with natural rhythms rather than against them. David found himself learning as much as he was teaching. The indigenous visitors shared their own solutions for community resource management, many of which aligned perfectly with the principles of his mechanical network. Their traditional methods of water distribution, in particular, offered insights that would lead to significant improvements in the system. "See how they use natural contours for water flow?" David explained to Dr. Chen, sketching modifications to his original design. "We can apply the same principle to our energy distribution, making it even more efficient." Elon, who had been dividing his time between his various projects and the Amish community, arrived to observe these knowledge exchanges. He found himself particularly struck by how easily different traditional communities could communicate about sustainable practices, despite their diverse backgrounds. "We've been thinking about technology transfer all wrong," he remarked to Jacob. "Instead of trying to impose modern solutions, we should be helping communities share their traditional wisdom." The success of these initial exchanges led to a new phase of the project. With careful consideration for their values and way of life, the Amish community began developing what they called the Wisdom Exchange Program. It wasn't just about teaching others their mechanical system. It was about creating a framework for communities to share sustainable solutions while preserving their cultural integrity. Hannah played a crucial role in this development, drawing on generations of experience in maintaining community bonds through shared work and mutual support. "When we share a meal," she explained to a group of visitors, "we share more than food. We share our ways, our values, our understanding of how to live together." The program's structure reflected this holistic approach. Visiting groups would spend time not just learning the technical aspects of the energy network, but understanding the community principles that made it work. They would participate in shared meals, join in community work projects, and experience firsthand how technology could strengthen rather than weaken traditional ways of life. Bishop Yoder, initially cautious about this expanded interaction with the outside world, saw how it was actually strengthening their community's commitment to their values. Young people who might have been tempted by modern ways were instead finding pride in their traditional knowledge and its relevance to global challenges. "We are not changing our ways," he observed during a community gathering. "We are helping others remember ways they have forgotten." The project's impact began to spread in unexpected directions. Universities requested permission to send students, not just to study the mechanical system, but to learn about community-based approaches to sustainability. Environmental organizations sought to understand how traditional wisdom could inform climate change solutions. Dr. Chen, who had been meticulously documenting the technical aspects of the network, found himself increasingly focused on the social principles that made it work. The engineering is elegant, he noted in his journal, but the real innovation is in how it brings people together. As spring progressed, the community faced a new challenge. The success of their wisdom exchange program had created more interest than they could handle while maintaining their way of life. They needed to find a way to share their knowledge more widely without overwhelming their community. The solution came from an unexpected source. David, during his morning inspection of the network, had an insight while watching how the system distributed energy across the community. What if we distribute the teaching the same way we distribute the energy? He suggested at the next community meeting. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Just as the mechanical network shared energy across multiple farms, they could share the teaching responsibility across multiple communities. Each participating group would learn not just the technical aspects, but how to teach others while preserving traditional values. Elon, who had been wrestling with similar challenges in his other sustainable energy projects, saw the broader implications. This isn't just about sharing technology, he realized. It's about creating a network of communities, each maintaining their own traditions while helping others do the same. The implementation of this expanded vision brought new challenges and opportunities. The community needed to develop teaching materials that could be understood across cultural boundaries. Sarah worked with Dr. Martinez to create guides that used simple illustrations and universal principles, avoiding the need for complex technical language. The key, Sarah explained, is to show rather than tell. When people see how the system works with their own eyes, they understand it in their own way. The spring planting season became a practical demonstration of these principles in action. Visiting groups participated in the community's agricultural work, seeing firsthand how the energy network supported traditional farming practices. They learned not just how to build mechanical systems, but how to integrate them into their community's existing ways of life. Hannah's kitchen became an unexpected classroom where visitors learned about food preservation methods that required no electricity, traditional cooking techniques that maximized energy efficiency, and ways of organizing community work that strengthened social bonds. Every culture has this wisdom, she observed, teaching a group of women from different communities how to preserve vegetables using traditional methods. Sometimes we just need to remind each other. The project's success attracted attention from unexpected quarters. International development organizations began to see the value of this community-based approach to sustainable technology. Rather than imposing modern solutions, they started looking for ways to support traditional communities in sharing their wisdom. Reynolds, whose role had evolved from government overseer to project advocate, helped establish a unique classification for these knowledge exchanges. They would be protected as cultural heritage practices, ensuring that the focus remained on community wisdom rather than technical specifications. As May approached, bringing with it the promise of summer, the community prepared for their largest challenge yet. They would host a gathering of representatives from traditional communities around the world, not to teach them about the mechanical network, but to create a framework for sharing sustainable wisdom across cultures. We are not the teachers, Jacob reminded everyone during the preparation meetings. We are simply the first to remember that old ways can solve new problems. The preparation for this gathering tested everything the community had learned over the past year. They had to figure out how to host dozens of visitors from different cultures while maintaining their own way of life, how to facilitate knowledge sharing across language barriers, and how to ensure that every participating community's traditions were respected. David's workshop became a symbol of this integration of old and new. Traditional wooden tools hung alongside technical drawings, while visitors from different cultures added their own insights to the evolving design of the energy network. The steady clicking of the gears provided a constant reminder of how mechanical simplicity could support community complexity. The upcoming global gathering required careful planning that tested the community's values and resourcefulness. Bishop Yoder worked with Sarah and the community elders to establish clear guidelines that would protect their way of life, while fostering meaningful exchange. We must remember, he cautioned during a planning meeting, that our strength lies not in becoming a center of attention, but in remaining true to our principles while sharing God's wisdom. The logistics were daunting. The community needed to arrange accommodation for visitors that respected both their traditions and those of their guests. Hannah organized a network of families who would provide meals, ensuring that dietary restrictions and cultural preferences were honored. Food speaks a universal language, she said, teaching a group of women how to modify traditional recipes to accommodate different cultural needs. When we share our table, we share our hearts. David and Dr. Chen worked to create demonstration models that could be easily replicated using materials available in different regions. They built miniature versions of the energy network using bamboo, recycled metal, and even carved stone, showing how the principles could be adapted to local resources. The beauty of mechanical systems, David explained to a fascinated group of visitors, is that they work the same way, regardless of what they're made from. The principles remain constant, even when the materials change. Elon, who had been quietly supporting the project's expansion, saw something revolutionary in this approach. We've been trying to solve global problems with one-size-fits-all solutions, he observed during a late-night discussion with Jacob. But real sustainability comes from helping communities adapt universal principles to their local conditions. The preparation phase revealed unexpected challenges. How would they translate complex technical concepts across multiple languages? How could they ensure that the knowledge shared would strengthen rather than undermine traditional ways of life? How would they handle the inevitable interest from media and technology companies? Sarah developed a unique solution for the translation challenge. Instead of relying on technical terminology, she created a visual language of simple symbols and demonstrations that could be understood across cultural boundaries. Working with Dr. Martinez, she documented how different communities describe similar concepts in their own terms. We're not just translating words, she explained to the project team. We're translating ways of seeing and understanding the world. The community's young people played an increasingly important role in the preparations. Their natural ability to bridge traditional and modern perspectives proved invaluable. Many had grown up understanding both the mechanical principles of their community's technology and the importance of maintaining their cultural values. Our young people are showing us how to move forward while staying true to who we are, Jacob remarked during a community gathering. They understand that innovation doesn't have to mean abandonment of tradition. As the date of the gathering approached, the community faced an unexpected challenge. News of their project had reached major technology companies who began making inquiries about partnering on large-scale implementations. These overtures threatened to shift the focus from community-based solutions to commercial applications. Reynolds, drawing on his government experience, helped the community establish legal protections for their approach. What we're protecting here isn't just a technology, he explained. It's a way of life, a method of teaching, a form of community wisdom that can't be reduced to patents and products. The solution they developed became known as the Community Knowledge Trust, a legal framework that protected the principles and teaching methods while ensuring they remained freely available to communities who would use them in accordance with the established guidelines. Think of it like our seed-saving practices, Jacob explained to concerned community members. We freely share our seeds with those who will use them to feed their communities, but we protect them from those who would turn them into products. The spring weather brought its own challenges, with unusual patterns of rain and temperature fluctuations testing the network's adaptability. Yet these challenges proved valuable, demonstrating to visitors how the system could respond to changing conditions while maintaining its core functionality. David spent long hours in his workshop, fine-tuning the demonstration models and developing new ways to explain complex concepts through simple mechanical demonstrations. His quiet innovation continued to impress even the most skeptical visitors. What David has created, Dr. Chen noted in his journal, is not just a mechanical system, but a new way of thinking about how communities can solve problems together. The gathering would bring together representatives from over 30 traditional communities, from Himalayan villages to African tribes, from Pacific Island communities to Native American nations. Each would bring their own wisdom about sustainable living, creating a unique opportunity for mutual learning and exchange. Hannah's organizational skills proved crucial as the community prepared to host this unprecedented event. She coordinated with women from throughout the community to arrange meals, accommodation, and practical demonstrations of daily life that would show visitors how the energy network supported their traditional practices. "We're not just sharing technology," she reminded her helpers. "We're sharing our way of life, our values, our understanding of how to live in harmony with God's creation." The day of the global gathering dawned with a brilliant sunrise over Lancaster County. The air was crisp with early summer freshness, and the fields sparkled with dew as the first visitors began arriving. Buggies and modern vehicles shared the roads leading to the Stoltzfus farm, a visible symbol of the unprecedented convergence about to take place. The Learning Center, constructed specifically for this event, hummed with activity. Representatives from indigenous communities worldwide mingled with Amish families, while translators worked to bridge language gaps. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of shared purpose that transcended cultural differences. David stood at the center of his workshop, surrounded by visiting elders from various communities. Through Sarah's careful translation, he demonstrated how the mechanical principles of the energy network could be adapted to different environments and materials. "Watch how the system responds to change," he explained, adjusting a series of weights. The gathered elders nodded in understanding as the network smoothly redistributed its load, maintaining balance without external intervention. A Maasai elder from Kenya stepped forward, his traditional red robes bright against the workshop's wooden walls. Through an interpreter, he shared how his community had faced similar challenges in maintaining traditional practices while adapting to environmental changes. "We see in your system the same wisdom our ancestors used to manage grazing lands," he said. "The understanding that everything must be in balance, that each part affects the whole." The morning's demonstrations were interrupted by unexpected news. Elon, who had arrived early with Dr. Chen and Dr. Martinez, received word that a major storm system was approaching the area. Weather services predicted it would be one of the most severe storms in recent history. "Perhaps," Jacob suggested, "God has provided us with an opportunity to demonstrate not just how our system works, but how communities can support each other through challenges." The community quickly shifted into preparation mode, drawing on generations of experience in handling emergencies without modern technology. Hannah organized the visitors into groups, each paired with an Amish family who would host them through the storm. "We will show you how we have always weathered storms," she told them. "Not with complex technology, but with cooperation and trust in God's providence." As the sky darkened and the wind began to rise, David made rapid adjustments to the energy network. Visitors watched in fascination as the system automatically redistributed loads, preparing for the increased strain the storm would bring. "See how it adapts?" he explained to the gathered observers. "Like a community, it grows stronger when under pressure, each part supporting the others." The storm hit with tremendous force. Rain lashed against windows and wind howled through the valleys. Throughout the community, modern power systems failed, plunging the surrounding areas into darkness. But in the Amish farms connected by David's network, work continued almost normally. In the main barn, converted temporarily into an emergency gathering space, representatives from different communities watched as the network continued to function, providing power for essential tasks through purely mechanical means. A Native American elder from the Pacific Northwest nodded in appreciation. "This is how our people survived for generations," he said. "Not by fighting against nature, but by working with it, by staying connected as a community." The storm became an unexpected teaching moment. Visitors saw firsthand how the community's traditional practices and David's innovations worked together to maintain stability in crisis. The network's mechanical simplicity proved more reliable than the sophisticated electrical systems that had failed throughout the region. As the storm raged outside, something remarkable began happening inside the barn. Representatives from different communities started sharing their own stories of resilience, their traditional methods of handling crises. The gathering transformed from a planned demonstration into a spontaneous exchange of generational wisdom. An elder from a Himalayan village described their ancient water management systems. which used principles similar to David's energy network. A woman from a Pacific Island community shared techniques for building storm-resistant structures using local materials. Each contribution added to a growing tapestry of sustainable wisdom. Elon, watching this organic exchange of knowledge, turned to Jacob. "This is more than we could have planned," he said. "They're not just learning about your system, they're rediscovering their own wisdom through it." The storm continued through the night, but the barn remained a hub of activity. Hannah and the community women organized meals using traditional preservation methods and cooking techniques that required no electricity. Visitors helped with tasks, learning through participation how the community functioned during challenges. David worked continuously, monitoring the network and making minor adjustments as needed. The system's clicking had changed its rhythm, adapting to the storm's patterns but remained steady and reliable. "The network is teaching us," he explained to Dr. Chen, who was meticulously documenting everything. "Each challenge shows us how to make it better, more responsive to nature's rhythms." By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape and transformed perspectives. The surrounding areas were still without power, but the Amish community had maintained its essential functions throughout the night. As the sun rose, visitors gathered outside to survey the aftermath. The contrast was striking. Dark windows in the distance marked homes without power, while the Amish farms continued their morning routines uninterrupted. "This is true resilience," Dr. Martinez observed, watching the community work together to clear fallen branches and repair minor damage. "Not just in the technology, but in the way people come together." The storm's impact extended beyond physical demonstration. It had shown more powerfully than any planned presentation could have the real-world value of combining traditional wisdom with innovative thinking. Representatives from various communities began adapting David's principles to their own needs. The Maasai elder sketched plans for a mechanical system to manage water distribution across drought-affected regions. The Himalayan community proposed modifications for high-altitude applications. Elon, who had witnessed countless technological demonstrations throughout his career, recognized that something unprecedented was occurring. "We're seeing the emergence of a new kind of innovation," he told Reynolds, who had arrived to assess the storm's impact. "One that grows from the bottom up, rooted in community wisdom rather than imposed from above." The gathering's final days took on new significance after the storm. Discussion shifted from theoretical applications to practical implementations. Communities began forming direct connections, planning exchanges of knowledge and resources. Sarah worked tirelessly, coordinating these emerging partnerships while ensuring they remained aligned with Amish values. "We're not creating a new technology," she explained to curious visitors. "We're helping communities remember and share wisdom they already have." The project's impact had grown far beyond its original scope. What had started as a simple mechanical innovation was becoming a movement for community-based sustainable development. Traditional communities worldwide were recognizing their own strength and wisdom, seeing how their ancient knowledge could address modern challenges. Bishop Yoder, observing these developments, offered a perspective that resonated with many. "Perhaps this is why God brought us all together, not just to share our ways, but to remind the world that true progress doesn't always mean abandoning the wisdom of the past." As the gathering drew to its climactic final days, the true significance of what had been achieved began to crystallize. The storm had served as a powerful catalyst, but it was the aftermath that revealed the deeper transformations taking place. Representatives from major international organizations arrived to witness what was happening. The United Nations sent observers interested in sustainable development. The World Bank dispatched researchers to study the economic implications of community-based energy systems. "What we're seeing here," one UN representative noted, "could revolutionize how we approach development in traditional communities worldwide." David found himself at the center of increasing attention, but remained grounded in his community's values. Each morning, he still began his day with farm chores before moving to the workshop. His humility in the face of growing recognition impressed visitors as much as his technical innovations. "The system isn't mine," he explained to a group of admirers. "It belongs to the community, to anyone who understands its principles and respects its purpose. Elon, who had seen countless innovations come and go, recognized something unique unfolding. During a crucial meeting with international development experts, he made an unprecedented announcement. "My companies will provide resources and support for implementing these systems worldwide," he declared. "But with a crucial difference. Instead of controlling the technology, we'll facilitate communities teaching other communities. The knowledge stays where it belongs, with the people who use it." This announcement sent ripples through the gathering. Traditional communities that had been hesitant about working with large organizations saw a new possibility, a way to maintain their independence while accessing needed resources. The Amish community, led by Bishop Yoder, worked with Sarah to establish clear guidelines. For this expanded mission, they developed what became known as the Lancaster Principles, a framework for sharing traditional wisdom while protecting community values. All knowledge sharing must strengthen, not weaken, traditional communities. Technologies must be maintainable by local people using local resources. Implementation must respect cultural and spiritual values. Benefits must serve the community, not outside interests. Natural systems and rhythms must be honored. Teaching must happen, person to person, community to community. Wisdom must flow in both directions, with each community both teaching and learning. Hannah's role grew as she helped organize what would become an ongoing series of community exchanges. Her kitchen became a model for how traditional wisdom could solve modern problems, demonstrating food preservation techniques that required no electricity and minimal resources. "Every community has its own wisdom," she explained while teaching, "a group from different cultures. When we share these gifts, we all become stronger." Dr. Martinez and her team documented how different communities adapted David's principles to their unique circumstances. In the Amazon, indigenous groups modified the system to work with river currents. In Mongolia, nomadic communities developed portable versions for their mobile lifestyle. What's remarkable, Dr. Chen noted in his research, is how the basic principles remain constant while the applications vary widely. It's like watching evolution in action, but with technology that strengthens rather than displaces traditional ways of life. The gathering reached its pinnacle with a ceremony that no one had planned, but everyone recognized as essential. Representatives from each community brought symbols of their traditional wisdom, crafts, tools, seeds, creating a physical representation of their shared commitment to sustainable living. Jacob, watching the ceremony unfold, turned to Elon. "When we started this project, we thought we were solving an energy problem. Now we see we were really helping communities remember their own strength." The impact extended beyond traditional communities. Modern cities began sending observers, interested in how these principles might help create more resilient urban neighborhoods. Universities revised their engineering curricula to include study of community-based technological development. Reynolds, who had once sought to regulate the project, became one of its strongest advocates within the government. "What these communities have shown us," he testified before a congressional committee, "is that security doesn't come from control, it comes from cooperation and shared wisdom." As the gathering neared its end, David made one final modification to his original design. He created what he called the teaching network, a mechanical system that demonstrated how knowledge, like energy, could flow between communities while maintaining their independence. "Just as our energy network distributes power without centralizing control," he explained, "this system shows how wisdom can spread without being standardized or controlled." The modification became a physical metaphor for the entire project, a way of showing how traditional communities could support each other while maintaining their unique identities. The steady clicking of its gears seemed to echo the heartbeat of cooperation that had emerged. The final days of summer brought a sense of completion and new beginnings to Lancaster County. The global gathering had concluded, but its impact continued to ripple outward in ways that would transform both the Amish community and the wider world's approach to sustainable development. One crisp September morning, Jacob stood with Elon and David in the original workshop where it had all begun. The familiar clicking of gears provided a steady backdrop to their conversation. But now the sound carried new meaning, a rhythm that spoke of tradition and innovation working in harmony. "It's hard to believe," David said, adjusting a gear with practiced ease, "that what started as a simple solution for our farm has touched so many lives." Elon, who had delayed several major project launches to remain involved with the Lancaster initiative, nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the most powerful innovations are the ones that help us remember what we already knew." The workshop itself had evolved. Along its walls hung drawings and models sent by communities worldwide, each showing how they had adapted David's principles to their local needs. A map marked the growing network of participating communities, from Himalayan villages to African townships, from Pacific islands to Arctic settlements. Sarah entered carrying a thick folder of letters and reports. As the project's primary liaison, she had been documenting the various implementations and their impacts. "The results are remarkable," she explained, spreading papers across David's workbench. "Communities that adopt these principles aren't just solving energy problems, they're strengthening their traditional ways of life." The reports told compelling stories. In a remote Andean village, the mechanical network had helped revive traditional weaving practices by providing reliable power for looms. A Maasai community had adapted the system to manage water distribution, allowing them to maintain their pastoral lifestyle despite increasing drought conditions. Hannah joined them, bringing coffee and her fresh-baked bread. Her kitchen had become famous among visitors, demonstrating how traditional wisdom could address modern challenges. She had begun documenting traditional food preservation techniques from different cultures, creating a repository of sustainable practices that required no electricity. "Every community has its own kind of wisdom," she said, pouring coffee into simple cups. "Our task isn't to change that wisdom, but to help it grow stronger." Bishop Yoder arrived with Reynolds, who had become a regular visitor and advocate for the community's approach. The government official had undergone his own transformation, from skeptical regulator to passionate supporter of community-based innovation. "Washington is finally beginning to understand," Reynolds reported. "They're seeing that real security and sustainability come from empowering communities, not controlling them." The impact of the project had extended far beyond its original scope. Universities were revising their engineering curricula to include study of community-based technology development. International aid organizations were rethinking their approach to sustainable development. Even major corporations were beginning to explore how traditional wisdom could inform their practices. Dr. Martinez, who had been documenting the social impact of the project, shared her latest findings. "What we're seeing is a new model of innovation," she explained. "One that grows from the bottom up, rooted in community values and traditional knowledge." The success stories continued to multiply. A group of Pacific Island communities had created an inter-island network of mechanical systems, helping them maintain their traditional fishing practices while adapting to changing climate conditions. Indigenous communities in the Amazon had modified the principles to create sustainable transportation systems that didn't require fossil fuels. Dr. Chen, who had initially approached the project from a purely technical perspective, had become one of its most eloquent advocates. "The genius isn't just in the mechanics," he explained to a group of visiting engineers. "It's in how the system strengthens community bonds while solving practical problems." The project's influence began reaching urban areas as well. Neighborhoods in major cities were adapting the principles to create community-based energy and resource management systems. The Lancaster principles were being taught in urban planning courses and community development programs. Elon's companies had undergone their own transformation. Instead of focusing solely on high-tech solutions, they had begun developing what they called appropriate technology, innovations that could be maintained and controlled by the communities that used them. "We're not abandoning advanced technology," Elon explained to his board of directors. "We're learning to create technology that serves communities rather than replacing them." The Stoltzfus farm remained at the heart of this growing movement, but in a way that preserved its essential character. Visitors were carefully screened and hosted at the learning center, while the family maintained their traditional way of life. It was a living demonstration of how communities could engage with the wider world while protecting their core values. David continued to refine and improve his original design, but always within the framework of Amish principles. Each modification was tested not just for its technical efficiency, but for its impact on community life. The best solutions, he often said, are the ones that bring people together, rather than push them apart. Hannah's role had evolved as well. She began organizing what she called wisdom exchanges, gatherings where women from different communities could share their traditional knowledge of food preservation, textile making, and other practical arts. These aren't just old ways of doing things, she explained to a group of visitors. They're proven solutions that have sustained communities for generations. Sarah's work as a liaison became increasingly important as the network of participating communities grew. She developed methods for translating not just words but concepts across cultural boundaries, helping communities share their wisdom while maintaining their unique identities. Each community speaks its own language of sustainability, she noted. Our task is to help them understand each other without losing their distinct voices. Jacob, watching all of this unfold, found himself reflecting on the deeper meaning of their experience. During an evening gathering with family and close friends, he shared his thoughts. When we started this project, we thought we were protecting our way of life from the modern world, he said. Instead, we found that our way of life has something important to offer that world. The impact on the younger generation was particularly noteworthy. Young people in the community, who might once have been tempted by the allure of modern technology, found new pride in their traditional knowledge. They saw how their skills and values could help address global challenges. We're not just preserving old ways, one young community member explained to a visiting group. We're showing how these ways can help build a better future. The project's success led to the establishment of what became known as the Global Community Wisdom Network, a framework for sharing sustainable practices across cultures while protecting traditional values. The network operated on principles inspired by David's mechanical system. Knowledge flows in multiple directions, with each community both teaching and learning. Solutions are adapted to local conditions and resources. Traditional wisdom is preserved, and strengthened communities maintain control of their own development. Natural systems and rhythms are respected. Technology serves community bonds rather than replacing them. As autumn approached, bringing with it the harvest season, the Stoltzfus family hosted one final gathering. Representatives from participating communities worldwide returned to Lancaster County to celebrate what had been achieved and plan for the future. The gathering culminated in a harvest festival that demonstrated the project's impact. Traditional foods from different cultures were prepared using sustainable methods. Craftspeople demonstrated how mechanical systems had been adapted to support traditional arts. Musicians shared songs that celebrated community resilience and wisdom. During the festival, David unveiled his latest innovation, a mechanical system that demonstrated how knowledge could flow between communities while maintaining their independence. The device, like his original energy network, used no electricity but showed through its moving parts how communities could support each other while preserving their unique identities. This isn't just a model of how energy moves, he explained to the gathered observers. It's a picture of how wisdom can spread without being standardized or controlled. As the festival concluded and visitors began their journeys home, each carrying with them seeds of knowledge to plant in their own communities, Jacob and Hannah sat on their porch in the gathering dusk. The clicking of David's invention provided a gentle counterpoint to the evening sounds of the farm. We've been blessed, Hannah said softly, not just with success, but with the opportunity to share God's wisdom with others. Jacob nodded, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. And in sharing, we've grown stronger ourselves. The project had achieved something remarkable. It had shown how traditional wisdom could help solve modern problems while strengthening rather than weakening the communities that held that wisdom. It had created a new model of development, one that grew from the bottom up, rooted in community values and traditional knowledge. As night fell over Lancaster County, the steady rhythm of David's invention continued, its clicking a reminder that sometimes the most powerful innovations are the ones that help us remember what we've always known. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.